Hello, it's Arron from Gothic Gaming here, and I just wanted to have a quick word before you watch this video. The first 5 minutes of this video, unfortunately, we had some audio problems. So if you skip the first 5 minutes, and then you can get into the content where I interview 3 amazing upcoming TOs. Don't miss out, you're going to want to hear what they have to say.
Hello and welcome to Gothic Gaming. And tonight you can see that I am joined by 3 special guests, and unfortunately Toby's not joining us tonight because he has been stricken by nervous plague. However, we've gone for a bit of an upgrade. Tonight I'm joined by 3 different lovely individuals who are known as TOs, but we'll introduce them individually. So let's get started. So first we've got Dan from Gothic Games. Dan, give us a wave.
Hello, hi.
I love it. Look at the enthusiasm. It's amazing. You can do better than that, Dan. Come on, give us a good one.
Hello, hi. Happy to be here, everyone.
Love it. And after that, we've got Lewis from 6++, Elmo Miniatures, and the TO of Saffron Slam. Give us a wave, Lewis.
Good evening, Aaron. How's it going?
It's going very well. Thank you for asking. You see, look, Paul, he cares.
I'm just pretending.
You just pretending. Oh, okay. It started already. And then after that, we have got the one and only Paul from Peterborough Slam and Vanguard Tactics. Paul, give us a wave. Oh, see, look. Dan gave it the beans, unlike Lewis and Paul have just been disappointments so far. So
building into it.
Building into it. Anyway, before we get started, I need to mention a few things. If you like what you see tonight, and if you like the content we produce, I need you to do 3 things. I need you to hit those magical buttons. I need you to like. I need you to, more importantly, subscribe. And then can you please hit the bell notification so that every time we go live, or we drop a video, you know what's coming. And that would really help us out. Also, as well, we've got 2 sponsors that we need to mention. So our first sponsor is Glasshammer Gaming. They are a store based in Telford, I believe. It's pretty bad if I don't know where my own sponsor's store is. But they also run massive events. They've just done their first super major. If you put Black Crow in the coupon code for Glasshammer Gaming, you get an additional 5% off whatever you purchase from them. So they already offer up to 20% from their online store off of Warhammer 40,000 and other hobby-related goods. But you can also get an additional 5%, and that code does work on their tickets to their events, which is pretty cool. Save yourself a couple pounds. Our next one is Terrain Forge. Terrain Forge are the sponsors. They have provided us with our Crow terrain, which you see in all of our battle reports. It's amazing. You can get customized terrain just for you. Give the guy a shout out, give him a ring. If you put BCG5 in the store code, you get an additional 5% off. So Black Crow are just giving you 5% off everywhere, apparently. Well, I say everywhere. 2 places, Glasshammer and Terrain Forge. But anyway, let's get into what we're going to be talking about tonight. So as you can see from the title, it's an interview with TOs. So the reason I've invited these gentlemen on tonight is because they are running events that are all very different to what the events you might see from the super majors like UKTC, from those with Mikey from Hellstorm, and also from Glasshammer, which has just done their first super major. So Dan is I suppose I could say the owner of Gothic Games, Canterbury.
And proprietor.
And proprietor. Okay, I can't forget that part. And you are currently running massive single-day events, as well as I think it's 1 GT a year. Is that right currently, or has there been more?
So yeah, on the calendar for this year, it's just the 1 GT, but it is the Golden Ticket GT. Last year I ran 2 GTs, but yeah, primarily it's the giant RTTs, which just kind of caught everyone a bit, me particularly, flat-footed, but yeah, big RTTs.
Because I think you're getting up to what? 60 persons? 70 person events?
So yeah, I think the largest was mid-60s to date. And with some logistical changes, the nature of I mean, I can have that venue back. I've just settled for a casual 50 venue hall at the moment. The last RTT was 46 players, I think, and that was only with about 4 weeks of promotion. So yeah, my next RTT is coming up in September. All focus at the moment is going on to the August GT to make that the best experience it can be.
What's really important to note as well is that your tournament, all three of your tournaments have different terrain, different ways of actually doing the tournament, different types of players are coming to your events. But what I think it is it's providing events for everyone. You're all providing events that anybody can go of any level, and I think that's really important to note. And we'll get on to Lewis and Paul and what's making your events so different and so special as well. And I mean, we touched on it before we started recording, didn't we, Dan? That you have recently been named as a Warhammer hero. So what did that entail? How did that go about in you achieving that?
So I believe that's primarily through the Warhammer Alliance work that I did. So sort of the quick sort of history of Gothic Games. It started off as a Warhammer Alliance club pre-COVID. And then post-COVID, I approached my school, for whom I work, who are really supportive of everything, and said that I'd really like to offer this to other schools. I was kind of that kid that grew up in a games workshop, big up Games Workshop Croydon. But though that kind of environment can't exist anymore for all kinds of mostly positive reasons, safeguarding it out. But I wanted to kind of recreate that sort of environment, so the school supported it. But then to kind of make it a financially viable business model, while still keeping it free for the children to attend, because that was really important for me. I kind of wanted to run these events, and the school were kind of like, have at thee, and they've been really supportive with the logistics. Obviously, it was kind of, we were unlocking after COVID, so there was opportunities to use venues and things, and they gave me favourable rates while it was sort of all up and running. And that's kind of how we got. So the Warhammer Hero thing, I think, mainly came through the Warhammer Alliance stuff. We catered to, I think it's over 20 different schools now. Last summer we ran 100 hours. I ran 100 hours worth of volunteer stuff, and essentially all of the events is just to go back to that, and then other charities within the local area, and other good causes. I've just sponsored some like our proms, for example, so paid for some disadvantaged people to be able to attend their prom where they wouldn't have been able to otherwise afford it, and also sort of just nicer transport for our kids, because again, it's kind of the sort of thing that is just not in a school budget, and it's just not appropriate to ask families for at this sort of current time.
Wow, that's amazing. And if you're feeling, obviously we see your social media presence at the minute. I mean, we've all seen the sponsored Gothic Games on our Facebook pages and so on, and I think I remember you starting. You came onto the TO sort of like Facebook group, which is just filled with some of the country's TOs, and you were just getting started. I think that was 18 months ago. Is that roughly 2 years?
Yeah. So Gothic Games has come to. I would have run September will be my 3rd anniversary. So I can't remember it was before or after that. I think it might have been after that. I got introduced to that by kind of one of the previous TOs in Kent. He doesn't run events now, but at the time was running some of the largest events in the southeast. So yeah, I rode around at that at the time, yeah.
And you've obviously just gone from strength to strength. You've got this golden ticket event coming up in August, which is just very exciting. And I've got some more questions for you later, and it's actually going to be aimed at all three of you, because I kind of want this kind of panel idea. I'm going to put you into scenarios and see kind of what you've dealt with in the past, and obviously myself, how I've dealt with sort of issues in the past as well. So Lewis, we're going to go on to you next. So you obviously, your tournaments are really out there in comparison to kind of what people think of when they think of a tournament, right? You run a tournament and you run events based on really thematic narrative scenery that is suitable for competitive style play.
Exactly, that's the one. We try and do something a little bit different at the Saffron Slam. as you say, I always found that with you guys on the call, the competitive scene where you've got kind of balanced terrain and kind of set maps and things like that is a system that's really, really well catered for here in the UK. At any given weekend, you can attend probably any number of 4 or 5 different events across the UK. So I wanted to do something a little bit different when I set up the Saffron Slam. Been going similar length of time as Gothic Games. Been started in July 2021, so just as we were coming out of lockdown. Ran a little 12-person event using some fun terrain here in Essex, and it was really well received. People really enjoyed it, and we've just been kind of growing it from there. But as you say, we try and focus on giving players a different tactical experience than what they would normally be used to at a competitive event. It's not the kind of the stereotypical themed terrain, which I know some people have seen as an excuse just not put enough terrain on the board and have people just shut off the board turn 1. That's very much not what we're about. We are still in a position where the terrain is really, really dense, and actually on some of the boards it's so dense it probably actually swings the other way and potentially favours some combat armies. So every board is a little bit different. So when you're turning up to the event, you don't quite know what you're going to play. So once you get up to your board, you can then start experiencing the terrain, and actually each terrain piece has got its own set of rules, and that just provides, I think, just a different challenge, just a slightly refreshing challenge for people that potentially have got to lots of other events and actually just want to have a bit more of a relaxed experience. And then we try and pair that with a really lovely venue here in the town that I live in. It's an old medieval town hall. It's got big red carpets and marble stairs, all this sort of stuff going up to it. And it's just a really, really nice venue, and actually just provides, I think, just something that's not quite there in the rest of the tournament scene at the moment. No insult intended to all the other events, but just try and do something that makes us stand out a little bit.
And that's quite something really for somebody to go that far, because some events have died by that sword, quite literally, by not providing a style of terrain that suits both narrative and competitive players. And you're probably, you've got a successful model where if people were to recreate that, they could definitely learn from what you've done. And I know recently didn't you do something with charity as well? You did some charity work regarding one of your events?
Yeah, the town that I live in and I host events in is called Saffron Walden in Essex. We have a strong military component. There's a barracks just outside the town that contains 33 engineers, British Army regiment that specialise in explosive ordnance disposal, so clearing up IEDs from Afghanistan and Iraq and things like that. And we want to do a charity event this year, and so they were the obvious choice. And there's a charity called the Felix Fund, which provides mental health and physical support for veterans who've come back from places like Afghanistan or Iraq and have been injured or have struggled as a result of the work that they've been doing. As you can imagine, explosive ordnance disposal is a pretty high stress job to be involved in. So wanted to give something back to the community, and as anyone that has played Warhammer will know, there's a lot of crossover between the armed forces and the Warhammer community. I think it's a strong asset that we have, and yes, we put on a one-day event, and credit to the players that turned up. We raised over £1,000 on that day for the charity. So it was a really, really incredible day, and it was heartening to be able to give something back.
And that in itself is just adds another element to kind of what you've achieved. Look, yeah, exactly. You deserve. I've
done one event. We've got Gothic Games here who've made a living out of this, and they do a lot more than I do.
But the thing is, it's not what's important, and we're going to get on to Paul as well. Is that all three of you are doing very good things for the Warhammer community, but in different ways. And I think that's really important to kind of highlight that, and hopefully people listening to this podcast can kind of get an idea of what you're all doing. So I'm going to go on to Paul. Now, Paul, you're Peterborough Slam, but you're not just Peterborough Slam anymore, are you? You're East Midlands Slam, and you've started to now grow with your events, and you're trying to spread not only a type of event which is very fair, because I've been to your events, and you TO No, I wouldn't say you TO hard, but you don't exactly mix your words, do you? You're very, very to the point. This is how it is. You're very much, this is the rule, this is how it is, this is where we're going to go. And the events run very smoothly because of that. I mean, I've been at one of your events. We've seen what it's like sometimes when you get some very good players. They can get a little bit heated, but you're extremely good at mitigating all of that. And your events have continued to be very successful, and now you've grown to East Midlands. And come and tell us a bit what you got in the pipeline, because I'm sure you've got more coming.
So we should probably talk about where we started. So I actually started with a bit of a partnership with Lewis. Hence, if you've obviously picked up on the Slam piece, you've got Saffron Slam, Peterborough Slam. So I started off like talking to Lewis about how do I start up a tournament, and we started a bit of a partnership in terms of shared assets. And Peterborough Slam actually started off as a half thematic, half competitive tournament. What's been great about Peterborough Slam is we've taken feedback from every event and we've used that to change and grow the event to cater to the demand. Because early on, living in Peterborough myself highlighted that there was a huge demand for people wanting events in Peterborough, Cambridge, Huntingdon, all the surrounding towns and cities around that area. So there was a great opportunity to start something up in Peterborough. Lewis was kind enough to kind of help me out and get me started, and that's kind of where it started. The thematic piece dropped off quite quick because the early feedback was we want competitive tournaments. Yeah, we want set maps. We started off player placed and thematic. We don't want that. We want set maps. Yeah, great maps, great terrain, fair balanced terrain, and we want it to be competitive. And it very quickly grew into this, what you called a Shark Tank earlier, with like top 30 in the UK players turning up regularly, and but the success has been listening to our customers, to the players, to the community around what they want, and the trainers grown. We've been trialing new stuff, so we use the game map EU terrain, so like the squares and the hexagons, pretty much all ruins, and we got to a point where we thought we'd do something different, so we now started incorporating containers, non-breachable terrain, and started doing some really different things as well, where we mix up missions, where you'll have all ruins one mission, round two you'll have non-breachable terrain. Really keeps people on their toes in terms of one mission, and it could be very shooty army focused. The next it'll be very melee focused. So you can't just turn up and go, oh, I'll just turn up with this army and I'll win the tournament because the terrain suits. Because every mission is different now. It did take a lot of investment, and we're now probably 18 months in, and we're now at a point where we've probably broke even because we've put a lot of money and effort into the event to get it to this point. And we've had people travel 4 hours now to our events. So we had a group of guys for a one-day event, Overcharged Wobblers. I'm just looking at my phone to remember the team name. Overcharged Wobblers, they were called. 4 guys. I think they said they drove 4 hours for an RTT because they heard how good it was. So, yeah, that's great.
I mean, and this is something that obviously all three of you should be celebrated for, because obviously you're growing, you're doing very well, and you're all doing it in different ways. And I think what should be reassuring for anybody out there who's looking at doing their own event, that actually, if you market yourself the right way, if you listen to your customer feedback and you go with kind of your gut and what you feel is right, and put your experience and into that, you can be successful. And what's really cool is that you've all done it very differently. So obviously some of you know that I have a hand in sort of the EAGT in Norwich. We didn't have a competitive scene, and we kind of plod along doing the tournaments for our local meta. But then these local lads, they'll go off and support Peterborough Slam as well when they can get there. We've had some of our lads go to Saffron Slam, and I know, Dan, you've spoken to some of our guys who are really keen to come to your events as well from Black Crow. And we're, as a team, really for supporting people like yourself, because you put on these really high standard events. You give really good map packs. You're very detailed. And And that's something that's really encouraging. So it's kind of a question for the group, and I'd like to see how you deal with that. So obviously, the way that you present your tournaments are all very different. So what is the inspiration behind like your tournament packs and how they come to how they are? Dan, if you'd like to get started, bud.
Thanks. No, so obviously I like to cater for as much as possible. There's a couple of key things that I run. So I assume that every event is someone's first event, and the pack is written that way. And on TOing on the day is delivered that way. But then I think it's kind of the teacher in me and the differentiation. So I go on the assumption, and sometimes it's not always this, that the more experienced competitive players will have read that pack cover to cover, or should have, and any questions that are not answered by the rules or not answered by anything will be in that pack. At the same time, actually, less experienced players probably wouldn't have and aren't bothered by it. So it's kind of, the information is kind of differentiated in that. So anyone that's kind of taking time to look at that pack. So absolutely, I'll answer questions on the day, but it's more that kind of resource. So there are no surprises, so that everyone goes into the event, hopefully, knowing what to expect, and in that sense of shared culture. So I've got sort of my mission statement in the front, just laying out what we're about. Again, with the terrain, just about being consistent so that people know what to expect. There are no unpleasant surprises or gotchas by virtue of the event itself, for bread and butter events. So yeah, going from that, really just try to anticipate what attendees might ask, or myself if I was going to a tournament, what's the information that I'd find helpful, and just pop that in the pack, really.
It's a really good point, Danny, actually, what you say about putting your mission statement or what the event is about front and center. I think clearly someone who has booked a ticket to a Saffron Slam thinking it's just going to be a normal GT might turn up, and if they haven't read the information properly, might be a little bit disappointed or just be completely blindsided by it. So I think it's really, really important that information comes across very, very quickly in the start of an event pack that says, this is what we're trying to achieve, this is the community we're trying to build at our events, and this is how we intend to go about doing it. And actually, we want all of our players to come along and bring that right attitude to the event, so that when you turn up and you're playing someone, in your example, Dan, who's brand new and who's never been to an event before, they're going to be on a similar level to you, and you're going to be able to help them have the best game possible.
Yeah. I mean, I think just one thing to keep in mind, I think it's just as crucial what I don't include in my packs. So I don't include extensive links to FAQs or other things, or reference other documents. One, that's homework. The players for whom that will be relevant, which even at a 64-player RTT isn't many, they will know that, and I will be guided by those in my TO decisions. But for the vast majority of people who perhaps it's their first event or second event, where all of that is largely relevant, I just don't include it. It just, the types of events I run, it never comes up. I say when it does, then it's a small minority of players, and they get it. They understand why those things are not in the pack. So we're welcome to ask questions beforehand, but I never make rulings on hypotheticals, unless it would always be guided by kind of events on the day, or if they've asked, it doesn't really come up for my events, thankfully.
Yeah, I don't know how much more I can add to that, so that's quite a comprehensive answer from the two of you. Totally agree with everything you've said. I think we are dealing with human beings as well, so I think it is important to make sure that we're very clear around how we expect people to behave at our events as well, which is in my event packs. We're dealing with human beings. They have different emotions, and sometimes in a competitive world it can get a little bit heated at times, and I know at Peterborough Slam, and Arron alluded to this, we have had a few of those instances, and it's important that players know that bad behaviour won't be tolerated, and it certainly isn't at any of my events, and we do deal with it professionally and fairly, because we want everyone to come, have fun, enjoy themselves, and all play at a fair, consistent event.
And these things do happen at events. You get people who maybe misbehave somewhat. You get people who maybe misunderstand their rules to their benefit. You get some people, and you know what? That can happen. Sometimes they can misread something and then they misunderstand it, and then they might read it once, not go back to it, and then actually they've missed like a key sentence within the rule. And that happens. We've all been playing 40k a long time. I'm sure we've all done that. But when you've come into these scenarios, chaps, how have you tackled it? Because I'm sure as a TO you've come across a time where someone's turned around and been like, that guy is just not playing his rules right, or that person or that woman, or what has been your angle with that? Have you gone in hard and said, no, you can't, you've got to be doing this, if I catch you doing this anymore, blah blah blah? Or if you kind of gone a little bit more lenient, what's been your angle?
I'll start with this one if you want, Arron. So,
yeah, go on, Paul.
I think it's important when there's some conflict that you get every side of the story. So the first thing I do is I don't jump to conclusions, because you'll always get that, oh, that person's doing this person's doing that, based on a sour moment or something maybe they've heard from another player. And I think it's really important as a TO that you gather the information firsthand and you speak to as many people as possible and take factual information before you make a judgment. Because if not, if you say, like, you jump straight in, you could be making totally the wrong decision and cause the whole situation to inflame and be 10 times worse than it potentially is. Because the amount of times I've had people say things to me, and when I've actually dug into it, there's nothing there. It's just emotions and people feeling a little bit hard done by because someone's actually had some lucky dice, or they've had some unlucky dice, and it's a dice game, isn't it? So, but there's a lot of times that you can get to the truth by listening rather than reacting. Or if you do feel that sometimes there might be something there, but you don't know for definite, sometimes you can compromise. So I've had issues with people being accused around dodgy dice. I've, rather than causing an issue at a tournament where I've accused, I've basically swapped, and obviously these people are top table at this point, I've swapped everyone's dice out for Peterborough Slam dice. A fair, consistent approach to, right, top tables, you're all going to use my dice, rather than pointing a finger, because I think as soon as you point a finger at someone, that's when you cause conflict.
Yeah, that's really important. You do need to avoid trying to get dragged into the sort of social media storm that can go around this, especially when we're thinking about someone like Paul's events where you have kind of high profile players attending. You can really ruin a person's reputation or ruin their ability to get any games or be trusted in the future if you get a decision like that wrong. I know from my experience, I've actually been incredibly fortunate in that in 3 years of running events, I have never yet had anyone be accused of cheating or anything like that. I suspect probably because I am trying to run a slightly more relaxed and kind of welcoming, chilled out environment, that is less likely to happen. But I know I have had 2 instances of people who haven't quite brought the right attitude that we want to see at the Saffron Slam. We want to create atmosphere where people are helping each other through their games rather than competing against each other. And actually there have been 2 occasions where that hasn't quite been the case. People have been taking it a little bit too seriously. And actually in both instances, similar to what Paul said, it's not about making a scene, it's not about kind of calling people out or anything like that. It's about actually, in both instances, taking those individuals to one side, either during the event or afterwards, and just having a quick conversation with them, saying, look, actually, I've seen a couple of experiences today where the standard of your conduct isn't quite what we're expecting. This type of event at Saffron Slam is there to help players through events and really give them a relaxed and really fun environment. And actually, you're not quite hitting that standard at the moment. We're not thinking about banning you or dishing out cards or anything like that. We actually just want a frank conversation. And in both instances, 2 out of 2 times, both players have turned around and said, do you know what, Lewis, actually, I think you're right. I don't think I have been hitting the standards of behaviour that you would expect. I apologise for that, and I'll come back the next day with a better attitude. And actually, one of them was only a 1-day event, so that individual has come back subsequently and been absolutely fine. And the second occurrence, the individual came back the following morning and was in a much better headspace and able to approach the rest of the event in the way that we expected, and we were able to diffuse any of that tension. So luckily it's something I've not come across a huge amount, but frankly we're all adults, so I'm yet to have an experience where a frank face-to-face conversation is not been sufficient to solve the problem.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, I've been quite fortunate in that I've never really had out-and-out cheating during an event implied, no significant misplays or rules that have had an impact on the day or really detracted from anyone's understanding. I mean, I think kind of again goes back to the pack. So in the beginning, I was quite apprehensive about it, but as time has gone on, I think the culture is quite established. And for most of my events, there is a youth event running alongside it. Like, you know, don't behave worse than the children. You are in a working school, even though it's the weekend typically. You know, conduct yourself in such a fashion. So yeah, thankfully, I think I only had to speak to one player about a cool down, and it only springs to mind because it's the one time that it's ever happened. And I was just a step outside, fresh air, calm down, you're just rolling dice, let's crack on. I think possibly it helps as well that certainly within the local community, the local area, over previous years, a lot of people I have played. So I think it goes back to what I said earlier, like, well, that doesn't sound like the experience I had with that player. And not to say that, you know, that just, you know, yeah, we need more information about this before going in guns blazing and blaming and testing everyone's dice in water.
Yeah, I've never done that, so I don't think it takes a lot to get to that point. So I like I said, I'd rather come up with a different compromise before I start shaming people by putting their dice in salty water. Yeah.
I mean, it's got to be odd-defying. Yeah, go on, sorry.
No, I was saying that Dan again said a really good point about building the culture. As a TO, you do get to decide what you think your event's going to be about, and actually, if it's going to be about a certain thing and you're going to try and establish a certain culture, you have a modicum of control over that. And actually, anyone that has come to a Saffron event will know that I hammer it into people. It gets hammered in the event pack. It gets hammered in the emails in advance of the event. It's hammered in the event briefing. We are trying to do something different here. This is supposed to be relaxed. If you want serious, competitive, hardcore play, there are much better events elsewhere that you can do that. So actually, I'm hoping by the time that players have actually, before they've even rolled the dice, it's been hammered into them 4, 5, 6 times. This is supposed to be something slightly a bit different. This is the culture we're trying to create. We've got loads of new players. Similar to Dan, I have younger players attending my events, gone through all the safeguarding stuff, and actually we want younger players to build that community in the future. And the only way you're going to build that community in the future is by having them be feeling welcome at an event. So creating an atmosphere that doesn't welcome young players is not conducive to the longevity of the community. So you've got to have that culture in place. But it does take time, and I'm sure at some point in the future, someone is going to cause a drama at one of our events, and it's going to explode because that's just how social media works nowadays, isn't it? But hopefully we will have done enough of them by that point that we can deal with it in a mature and adult way.
I know it's interesting you say about it exploding. So I think these issues only explode when the TO or the event handles it badly. Now, hear me out. So obviously the events that you hear about, where you hear things that have majorly gone wrong, but then you hear about how maybe the event has handled it itself. Some of them in the past have like made a public thing about it and turned it into more of like a way of advertising themselves rather than actually this isn't what we're about. And is that necessarily the right way of doing it? Because now actually it's not difficult to find out who said person was who has done these things. So is social media and announcing that you've had an issue on social media the right thing to do for the person? Because you're not actually protecting that person at this point. If someone has bought a ticket to your event and they make a mistake at your event, is it a good idea to be making big jokes about it on social media for everybody to see? What do you guys think about that?
My short answer is no, but again, I'm coming at that from kind of the teacher background, and there are wider elements of well-being. I think you've sort of seen some of the comments and things that I've posted on things like the TO forums and stuff like that. Like, that short answer is no, and there's a big difference between, do you know what, with some distance from whatever the infraction is being, and if everyone's in on the joke and you turn it on its head, fair enough. but I can't think of any examples of that spring to mind. I think a lot of these things are things that have, as you say, the TOs maybe haven't responded in the best way they could, and you know, these things will happen. You know, we are dealing with human beings, but I think if you focus on the negatives of your events, then that will beget more negatives potentially in the meantime. People aren't going there for a nice casual experience. They're going there because they want to see someone lose their cool, or you know, say that they could see that, you know, they were there with, you know, for the next drama, which it's not what I want for my events. I can't speak for anyone else, but it's not what I want for my events.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I really want people to walk away from Saffron events going, that was mental, but I had an absolute blast. That's the opinion I want people to have of it, and I'm not sure calling anyone out publicly is the way to go about it. But I mean, ultimately, I know that TOs will talk. There's a East of England little TOs group on Discord that players who are causing problems at events, their names are known, they are understood, and the issues that they've caused are discussed. So, but that's just within a group of 5, 6, 7, 8 TOs. So we know as a group of TOs that if there's an individual that's causing a lot of problems, it gets flagged up, and then actually each individual TO can decide whether they want that player at their events in the future, which means that you can kind of avoid those problems in the future if you're willing to take quite a hard stance on letting people in who've caused problems previously. And you don't need to do that publicly. You don't need loads of people to know who that individual's name is. You don't need to know what they've done, how they've done it, how bad it was, who said this and certain person said this. Like, you just don't need any of that. It's not helpful discourse, but it is good to know when issues have occurred amongst events so that other events can be ready for it. Because I think coming from a player's perspective, I think players would want to know that TOs are taking this sort of stuff seriously. So we're talking here about trying, not taking a softly approach, but we're trying to keep it very relaxed and keep it chilled, address the problems, but not do it in a particularly overt way. I don't want people to kind of think that that's us not bothering to face the issues. I think it's very different to that. It's just doing it in a way that doesn't kind of publicly shame people, because that's not necessarily the most productive way of doing it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Again, I think everybody deserves a second chance. It's kind of my ethos, I guess. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody deserves a second chance. Like Lewis said, there are people out there that we are aware of. And I guess my stance would be that they've probably had a second chance already. So maybe I would take the stance of maybe not letting them into my event and potentially cause the issue. Or if not, maybe set the scene before the event in terms of my expectations on a one-to-one basis. And certainly if there is anything that comes up, I feel like, again, like Lewis said, people need to see the TO take action. And I guess my stance would be for those that were impacted to see that or have a conversation so they know something's been done. But I agree, it doesn't need to go to the social world, that everybody that wasn't at my event to know what went on. It's got nothing to do with anyone else. It's just the TO, the person involved, and the people that were impacted. Just to make sure that everybody leaves having a great event and an experience, one way or the other, and knowing that when they return, it won't happen again.
And I think you've all three of you kind of come from a really good background of how you want to deal, how your events are run. And I think the reason that you don't have these major issues, I know, Paul, you mentioned that you'd had one or two, but ultimately nothing out of control. I think the reason that all three of you are doing so well with that is because of just how well organised your events have been, how well your event packs are written, which, you know, is really important. And everybody who is watching this, I just want you to know that, like, you'll be able to go onto all of these gentlemen's websites or their Facebooks and be able to see their events, be able to go through their packs, and they're there for everybody to read, and they're very detailed, very good, and very professional. And that's the sort of standard that tournaments need to be held at nowadays, because actually, for a lot of people, this is like one of their main incomes, one of their main businesses now. Tournaments have grown so much in the UK that you can drive. There's probably a tournament within an hour and a half of you across the whole country now. which is wild. Because we're probably one of the only countries on the planet that can say that. Would you guys agree? What do you think?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, there are a lot of events. I mean, Kent in particular, obviously last year we ran a Kent local circuit. But that was not to step on toes of UKTC or anything like that. It was simply because we've got a lot of decent players in Kent that, for reasons X, Y, and Z, cannot. Well, I think at the time you have to go to the big super majors to quote unquote compete. So it was just give them a little bit of recognition. But as I say, yeah, there are events going on every other week locally, and in the intervening weeks you don't have to travel very far at all.
It's almost difficult. It's almost impossible to run an event without it clashing with somewhere else within a 2-hour radius. It just doesn't happen. And then as more businesses come up like yourselves, as you grow and you start growing to larger events, eventually we may even get to a stage where we've got a super major happening somewhere in the country every weekend, which would be incredible. It just shows that the UK is genuinely the home for event style Warhammer 40k. Now I don't want to call it competitive anymore. I want to just call it Warhammer 40,000 or Warhammer events, because we cater to everybody, like all three of you are doing. I think one thing I did want to touch with you guys on is something that, you know, GW or Games Workshop, sorry, they've recently dropped the Pariah Nexus. Now that for the general public, that came out of nowhere. Like they announced it, but then they brought it forward very quickly. I mean, were you as TOs prepared for that to come forward so quickly, or have you had to quickly go out and do a lot of work?
Absolutely not. There was some sleepless nights wondering, is my terrain, I've got this golden ticket event coming up, it's sold out on missions that will, like, you know, the game will not be the same. It's not until August. No, sleepless nights. And I was very relieved once, even when all the missions were out in the wild. I was like, no, I need to see that pamphlet. I need to see that Pariah Nexus document, Tournament Companion, with their map packs before I can breathe. So I didn't rest. I was quite anxious up until that point, to be very honest.
Yeah, I think everyone will see, anyone that's looked at my website will notice all of my 40k events for the rest of the year. The event packs have gone to TBC because there potentially are TOs that see this stuff in advance, but I'm definitely not one of them. So very much have to react as it comes out. But I guess, again, it comes back to what we mentioned earlier about those event packs, in that a decent event pack has very clear rules deadlines, rules cut-offs, and hopefully players that get onto an event will be appreciative of the fact that actually, because the rules deadline is X weeks before the event, that if there are major changes, then people will accept the fact that we need to go back to drawing board and we need to start again. And the previous missions and deployments I'd chosen just don't work anymore, so I need to get rid of them. I need to start again. I need to go back into it. I will note, just for a personal gripe, changing those deployment zones are really annoying when you've just spent £2,000 on new mats with all of the competitive deployment zones marked on them. I'm very glad I spent that money. So it's been really good. Maybe about 3 days earlier to have been told that, but didn't place that order.
Yeah, same for me. Literally, we'd been going through this evolution of maps and missions, and we'd invested a lot of time, Peterborough Slam, putting together this 15 mission packs that we were so proud about, that we were going to use for the rest of the season, only to find out that probably 10 of them now need to be redone. Hours and hours of work absolutely wasted. So I need to get together with Byron and Ben, who helped me out with the Slam missions and maps and stuff, and we need to get together this week and go back to the drawing board. Hopefully, I mean, a lot of it won't change too much, but it's mainly the missions and how that terrain works with those missions. It's really important because, like I said earlier, we don't like missions favouring like one army, because if not, like with the meta that we have in Peterborough, if if I leave the missions kind of as they are and they're all very much melee favourable, I'm just going to turn up with 32 Blood Angels turn up to one of my events.
Which isn't ideal.
No.
It's just not ideal. I know, obviously, I didn't, for ourselves in the AGT, we didn't have an event planned until the end of July, so I've obviously got a bit of time to do that. But me and Paul, we recently went to Glasshammer, who made the decision to literally change a couple of their missions with a week. With what was it? A week?
A week, yeah.
And give credit where credit is due. I think they smashed it personally to be able to pull that out in that amount of time. I think they're lucky that some of their maps didn't need to change. But they still they took it was quite a big risk, I think, to take on Pariah Nexus so close. I know some events out there just said no, we're going to stick with the Leviathan. If you guys were put in that situation, do you think you would change? Would you take the risk?
I think with a week to go, from my perspective, I wouldn't change, but that's really because I tend to get quite a lot of new players or younger players who aren't necessarily keeping up with the new Games Workshop stuff every minute that it comes out. I think we can sometimes get ourselves into a little kind of event attending bubble where we're following every single thing that Games Workshop say. Whenever they put an article out, we're reading it straight away, we're digesting the rules, we're trying to come up with the best combinations, and you'll see that a lot on the 6++ channel. We're always kind of coming up with stuff and trying to solve things as they come out, but I'm not sure that's the majority of players, and I think especially newer players, they've just about got their heads around Leviathan. They go, yeah, cool, I can understand secondaries, I know how to do that, and now it's all changed. And I think you turn people off if you do that. But if you're running a super major, then people want the most competitive stuff, and probably brand new players aren't necessarily going to massive 2-day super majors like that as their kind of first ever event. So it just depends who you're catering for, doesn't it?
Yeah, Peterborough Slam. Personally, I wouldn't like to change a week before. But again, Peterborough Slam is all about what the customer wants. And with this big competitive kind of community that we've got, the expectation is that we run our tournaments to the latest rules. So as much as I wouldn't like to, I tend to feel like I have to at times. Luckily, I haven't had to change things that close to an event. But we have had like codexes dropped one day before submission and stuff like that, and I've had to do a lot of research and let it run because it comes down one day before submission. I've got 1 week to learn the rules of that codex before I get loads of questions at an event. You don't want to be getting asked certain questions and important moments of a game and you don't know what's going on. It's an extra piece of work, unfortunately, but like I say, we're all about what our customers and players want. So
yeah, I think I'd echo that. I think my heart as a player, I'd love to turn on a dime and be like, right, do what Glasshammer have done and embrace the new pack. But with thinking with my head and the commercial aspects, and people are potentially invested, more money and time, particularly they're travelling. Again, the nature of the players that I get would probably be sort of 50-50. There'd be lots of players that would be willing to give it a go, but no, just from a commercial aspect, for my events, I couldn't. I'll never know for the August Golden GT because thankfully it came out just in time to not be a big issue. So I think I published my missions, but hopefully I never have to answer that question with a huge GT on the horizon. Fair play for those guys for making that decision and sticking with it, and as you say, putting off a really good event.
Yeah, it was definitely. It was very different because it was obviously Glasshammer terrain, and they made the decision to go for WTC scoring. That was other than the ITT that I did recently, this is the second time I'd done WTC scoring. They even made the decision to use WTC rule pack, which I thought was quite brave because it's not something that's very commonly used in the UK. And I've got to say, I actually really enjoyed it. It was my first time with it. Paul, I don't know, you were at the event as well. How did you find that? And do you think it's something that you would employ with Peterborough Slam, this WTC scoring?
Possibly. I mean, I enjoyed it. It's a weird experience, though, not hearing anybody say, I'm going to put my models 1 inch from the wall here, because that doesn't count anymore, because you just charge the wall, don't you? So that was the biggest thing, like people getting their heads around this whole, what we're used to in terms of putting models in ruins and stopping these melee armies from running you over. It was a bit melee favourable because of the rules changes, but everybody knew that going into it. I think it made it more fun, to be honest. I certainly enjoyed it. It's very different to my experiences at UKTC, and definitely something, if I put to my community and they were up for it, that I would try. Yes.
And Lewis, what about yourself? Like, obviously, with a narrative terrain, would the WTC rules, do you know much about them? Would they fit your type of terrain?
Yeah, I mean, so the one thing I do always do, even though the terrain is narrative, it's still, we're using all the competitive missions, we're using all of the same rules that you would see at a UKTC event. So it just happens to be played on slightly different terrain. So it worked really well. We've got a teams event coming up in October, where we'll obviously clearly be using WTC terrain all the time, WTC scoring all the time. I quite like the differential scoring. I think it's quite a quite useful metric of differentiating players. Interestingly, in the Pariah Nexus pack, Games Workshop have actually put together their kind of proposed way of pairing and ranking players. And they've said, if you're running a competitive event, this is how we think you should pair players. This is how you should be ranking players. And that doesn't use WTC scoring. That uses just the victory point scoring. So it's interesting that Games Workshop have done that and suggested a specific way that they think you should be pairing and ranking your tournaments. So I guess it comes down to whether do you want to follow the kind of the WTC stuff, think about teams play, or do you stick with the GW way? Now they've put an official way of scoring Warhammer games.
Yeah, it does change your tactics a little bit as well, because when you play the normal way of scoring, UKTC, if we call it that, or Games Workshop scoring 100 points, you very much just focus on how many points you can score. But the other thing I realised and noticed at the weekend was players were a little bit more ruthless around not letting you have those extra 3 or 4 points, and then we wouldn't worry about, that's fine, I won't stop you from scoring that, because every point counted, because that could be the difference between you like getting 18-2 or 17-3, 16-4, that extra point. Yeah. So it was almost around like, just don't let your opponent score as much as it was scoring myself, which is the kind of the team's world, isn't it? Yeah, like prevent your opponent from scoring is just as important as scoring yourself, and that's a very different environment to singles normally.
Yeah, it creates a bit more of a kind of brutal atmosphere sometimes, doesn't it?
It does, yeah, definitely.
You need to crush people. So I know for the way I tend to play with my Tyranids and my Tau, neither of my play styles are crushing people. They're very much sort of, if it wasn't WTC scores, it's 11-9, it's 12-8 scores. So in a singles environment where you're scoring WTC, I don't do very well at all. Might win my games, but I won't do very well at all. Whereas if I'm winning 95-90, then on UKTC, it looks like I've had an amazing time. But I would hope if my opponent's scoring 90 points, they're probably having a better time than if I've tried to absolutely crush them and limit them to 20 points.
It made it fun, though, because people were taking really aggressive chances because they just wanted to smash people. Yeah. And sometimes it worked and sometimes it just blew up in their face. And yeah, my first game, I had a guy literally just rushed me with 8 blob of Thunderwalls and 20 Wolfrin, and it totally went wrong. And then I just rolled him over in turn 1 on my turn. You wouldn't see that if you were playing just a UKTC, because you just be careful with your points, wouldn't you? That was a go or go bust situation, and you don't get them very often. It was fun.
Yeah, I think to me what it highlights is that like the numbers, the data doesn't always reflect the experience on the tabletop, and I think that's sometimes something that can get lost whenever where data is so readily available, and it is really helpful and great. But as you say there, that game there that you just described, some people looking at a 20-0 loss would be like, oh my god, that guy got stopped. but actually you might speak to that person. He's like, no, I risked it all for a big charge and it failed, but I had a great time doing it.
Yeah.
So I do see sort of merit to the WTC. Obviously I'm running my first teams. I've never actually been to a teams. I'm going to the November teams, but I'm running my first teams in October. So that'll be interesting. So I think there's something to be said as well about kind of broadening that community, beyond the UK, where, as you say, we've got lots of events here in the UK, but the perception over in Europe, you have a lot of bigger events, and they do bring a different energy to that, which I think would be nice to see, bring that over here.
I've got to admit, from my experience over the weekend with the WTC rules and scoring, going into it, there was a lot of negativity from like the community that I had saying, "Oh, the rules are stupid. They're not great." But then when I went and experienced it for myself, and Paul, you described it really well. People were taking wild risks for points. That kind of cagey style play where people are just basically scoring really uninteractive games and then letting your opponent score, but you're just scoring more, and just like dealing with small parts. That just didn't happen over the weekend under a WTC scoring. And actually, it did make the games more interactive. It meant that people were doing some wild things they probably wouldn't do at UKTC. I know I did. There were moments where I was like, well, what have I got to lose? It's not about like I'm either going to get 20-0'd, as people say, or I do something really cool and I absolutely love it. So if I know I'm already going to get 20-0'd, I know I've scored, the points I actually score don't matter at this stage because it's an unattainable lead. I might as well do something cool. And it meant that actually I walked away from games not feeling hard done by, but feeling like, oh yeah, I got smashed, but I did this really cool thing which was super fun. And for me, as like obviously with the EAGT as a TO, it kind of gave me a new perspective to the different scoring system out there. And maybe that because we do this GW or UKTC way of scoring, maybe it's not the best way for a player base. What do you guys think to that? Like, if you're hearing lots of feedback that it is positive, is it worth the change?
I mean, I think if everyone decides that's what they're going to do, then clearly we go with it. The only thing I would say before Dan and Paul come in, any scoring system which encourages players to crush their opponents, I think has a risk of negatively affecting newer players. So I think if you're rewarded for absolutely hammering someone, that's what people who want to go and win events or want to do well at events will try and do. So I think you run the risk of players who haven't quite got fully into the scene or aren't quite there yet. I think you run a higher risk. It's not, you can still have a good game even if you are getting crushed. You can still be a good opponent even if you're destroying your opponent. But every single time you encourage someone to absolutely try and hammer someone, I think you run the risk that their opponent does not enjoy that game and then does not come back in the future. So I think we need to be careful about it. I think it works really well in teams because that adds that whole layer of strategy in there about the different types of list you build into a team. You bring in your attacker list, you bring in your denial lists, and you're deliberately then trying to aim for certain WTC scores. I just worry slightly in a singles format that you risk alienating people who are just there for a good time.
Yeah, I totally. Go on, Dan. You go.
I mean, one of the other local TOs, the idea of like a Shark Tank invitational where everyone is on the same page and you are there. I think there are merits to it. There's no right or wrong way of playing. What I do like from my events, so obviously trying to score and determine who wins in a 64-player RTT. There is no perfect metric of doing that. I'm very upfront about it from the beginning. So actually, I do use strength of standing as well as wins. It's the open secret. It is somewhat potluck, like who will podium, but the podium prizes aren't really necessarily why people are there. People are there for 3 games. And what I think sticking with the Games Workshop scoring encourages, we do sometimes have those mismatches where there is a wide golfing skill. a good player and they know they've got the game in hand, they've got the win in hand, they will encourage, oh, by the way, did you know if you do this, you could score an extra couple of points there? Or while they're playing and there's that combat, they'll be like, oh, actually, if you do this, so it becomes a bit more of a learning experience, which I know not everyone is there for it, but I think you're going to encourage that more with the GW score in sort of the flavour of my events than you would do, I think, as we said, you're going to crush your opponents. But I think there's absolute merit in both play types, as long as you're upfront about the type of event that you're trying to foster.
Yeah, so again, it feels like when you go third, you agree with the first and the second. We all seem to be on the same wavelength. So, yeah, so I totally agree with what you both said, especially what Lewis said about newer players or junior players that don't understand the niche parts of the game maybe as much as your competitive players will just get rolled over, and that's not a fun experience. I had 2 games at the weekend that I went into and there was no way I was getting anything out of it. I still had a fun game because I knew how to kind of just frustrate. My enjoyment in those 2 games was just frustrating my opponent as much as possible. So I just got the most out of that. And I consider myself a good player, and I still got 20-0'd one game at the weekend. There was nothing I could do about it. So if you turned up to an event and got 20-0'd 4 or 5 games and come away with like nothing, I could see how that would really demoralise you and make you consider not going back. I think as a one-off, if you put it out as we're going to do this one-time event for our more senior players that come to the event, like no mercy kind of like WTC crush your opponent event, then you would get a certain kind of niche kind of market there, wouldn't you, in terms of who wants to come, and that would actually generate, I think, a very good event because everybody knows what they're going into. But if you rock up and not understanding what it is and get absolutely destroyed all weekend, then it's not for a fun weekend, is it? And you probably wouldn't spend that money again.
So then, with that in mind, is it worth considering then running at one event but having almost two different tournaments happening simultaneously? So you have your more casual tournament happening, which is using this UKTC standard, which you can then advertise as your sort of new starter, beginner, more casual style event. And then you have another tournament, which you then advertise as this is the one we're going to do under WTC standard, which is better for your competitive side of things. What do you guys think to that?
So, the reason I don't, and we have flirted with the idea, and I've heard feedback, and some people have suggested it, but the reason I don't is I don't want to create a 2-tier event. I like creating an event where everyone is part of the same event, and I feel that doing that, players, if you consider my event as kind of intermediary from not having attended to the event to, this was pretty cool, where do we go next? There's more competitive events or 2-day events or whatnot. Part of that learning experience is if you only play stronger, better opponents, and if they're all playing somewhere else, I don't think you're going to get those interactions. If I go back to previously, where sticking with points, if a strong player has that advantage, they can learn with that. We've been trialling some methods to kind of mitigate, almost like self-seeding for the RTTs at the beginning, just to kind of give some agency. I won't go into the details of it, but if you've been to them, then you get the email. But no, I think for me personally, I wouldn't run 2 concurrent events. I like everyone to be part of the same event, the same atmosphere, and mixing and encouraging that player base. But again, I can absolutely see why others might run two different events, but it's just not something that interests me at the moment.
Yeah, it's probably a no for me as well, Arron, because if I ran 2 events at the same time, that would reduce the amount of people in each event, and I know my guys are quite hungry for ranking points, and when you start reducing the number of people, you start really impacting their points that they earn for podium places. You turn up to a 24 person, you're going to get a lot less points than a 48. So I feel like that I would end up with disgruntled or disappointed players if I started splitting it like that. So, and again, like's been said, I think it's better when you include everyone in the same community, in the same room, in the same event, because it just generates that environment.
A couple of counterpoints, if I can. The ranking systems that we use, the Swiss Star ranking system, effectively already creates that, because after your first 2 games, the bottom players aren't playing the top players anyway. So you've already split the event at that point, haven't you? After 2 games, and if someone's lost all their games, they're never going to be playing someone that's won both of their games. So you kind of have done that. You've kept them all together. I know there's a really great series of events in Colchester in Essex by the guys at 40K Gaming, and what they'll do is over a 5-game weekend, after your first 2 games, they'll cut the event in half at that point, and they'll have the top half will then play a 3-game tournament, and there'll be a winner, second place, third place, and the bottom half will play a 3-game tournament, and there'll be a winner, second place, third place. So effectively your first 2 games seed the field, and then 2 separate RTTs happen after that. And they do a really good job keeping it feel like you're still playing the same event. So you've got top tables concurrent to each other. So you've got 2 sets of top tables playing next to each other, 2 sets of second tables, 2 sets of 3 tables. And that, I think that works really well. It does not address Paul's point about rankings. If you're going to an event for ranking points, clearly you cut an event in half, your ranking points are much lower. But actually, if you want to give your lower ranked players something to play for, then potentially cutting an event in half after the first 2 games, where in theory everyone of a similar level is then in a tournament with other people of a similar level, and all the people at the top level are just in a tournament with other people in the top level, you could try and effectively match people of similar skill together and then have them compete for some kind of prize together. And actually that means if you do lose your first 2 games, you still have something to play for, because you're still playing for first place. You just happen to be playing for first place in an RTT for the kind of lower ranked people, but you could still walk away with the first place trophy even after losing your first 2 games. So it's not something I've done, and I'm not sure I would do it, but I think it's really good laugh. It's a great way of running an event, and so I wouldn't discount it as an idea.
Not heard that before. Obviously, I've been to a couple 40K, but they weren't employing that when I was there. That's actually a very interesting point and way of doing it, depending on what you're trying to advertise to your public. Interestingly, Paul, you said about points, about saying that, obviously winning a massive, look, if you win a 160-man tournament, naturally you're going to get huge amounts of points. But actually, when they get to lower levels, the points, if you win a 15-man tournament, it's actually not too dissimilar as if you won a 30-40-man tournament. Because the only reason I know that is because one of the Black Crow lads runs his own little single RTTs, and so he's won them, and he's ended up having more points than some guy who's come third at a 40-person event. Which
there is a marginal difference though, and when you talk to the people that play in your community, and they're all squabbling over the fact that they're 0.4 points ahead of the person they're playing at the local club. You say it's only not much different, but sometimes there's 1 or 2 points make a difference. I think the important bit is understanding the community that you're in, and we've all got very different people that come to our events. And I think every question you've asked us, I think the point is for us to understand the people that come to our events and make a decision based on that. So you could get very different answers from all 3 of us every time, but all 3 answers could be the right answer because we know our community, we know our customers.
So there is something I do want to challenge you all on now, and I say challenge, probably not the right word. So recently, obviously, Glasshammer this weekend, they did something very different, which I don't think I've ever seen at an event. Now, I don't know, maybe at Gothic you do, I don't know if Saffron you do, but I know Peterborough, we hadn't seen this before. They gave people who got top for painting, got the exact same amount of prize support as those who won their event. And that went from first, second, and third. And I gotta admit, I thought that was a great idea. If you're able to do that, would that be something have you ever considered that before? Dan, I think you've got something to say.
We sort of do. So, I mean, to be honest with you, so obviously, as we don't go crazy on the price support. We do have a can I say my sponsors? Can I?
Of course.
Okay, so Element Games are our main sponsor, and they from the very beginning they supported us with a range of vouchers. But the podium prizes will never equate to more than the cost of the event ticket itself. That's not why I do my events. The prize support is not why people are coming to Cadbury to play games. But what I try to do with the painting is actually that is judged by the children. So it's completely impartial. Players don't get a say in it. I know that has some people previously, but I just wanted to try a little bit, help them feel included on the day, so they're not just sort of sidelined, and they will vote for the painting. And typically, I think my painting prize is worth the same as second place. I think it is in terms of vouchers and trophy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Thanks, Paul. I tend to make my best army and most sporting prizes the biggest prizes. I think potentially if you added the value of the trophy into the first place prize, it might tip it higher. But my most sporting prize is usually a commission painting prize, so it can be worth quite a lot of money. And the best army prize is usually the biggest box of models or game mats, that sort of stuff. And then the top prize is normally just some kind of box of models or a voucher or something like that. But usually try and make it that the winner wins the really cool trophy. I have a brilliant guy who I stole off you, Arron, that does all of my trophies.
Yeah, he still does our trophies as well.
Absolutely incredible work that he puts together. So they'll get that really cool trophy, and I think that's more what they'll get out of it rather than a specific prize. But actually, it's quite nice, I think, to reward the person who's got the most sporting award with the biggest prize and potentially the most valuable prize, because that's kind of the prize that I want people to win, if you know what I mean. Like it's the prize that is actually really hard to win, because to have 5 people think your game was the best game of the weekend, it's quite hard to do that. Whereas if you turn up with the best list, you'll probably win a Saffron event. If that's what you really want to do, you go and take the most broken thing, you'll probably win, because everyone else is having a bit more of a chill time or trying different stuff for different future, more competitive events. So it's try and reward that as much as I can.
Yeah, and then Peterborough Slam, best painted actually gets a better prize than second place in terms of monetary value, because we do give quite a good prize to first place, so like £75 worth of vouchers from one of our sponsors, Imps Gaming. So they provide us with vouchers at a rate, so we can give more to people as prizes. So 75 goes to first place, but best painted gets a free GT ticket every tournament, so which is worth £55, which is more than what second place gets. So we're in that first place. Podium and painting are actually our best 2 prizes. So you kind of say like that's something different, but it does sound like we're all kind of doing similar things, just in a different way.
Yeah, and I think we just highlighted that from the entire podcast, is that you've all come from similar ethics about how you want your events to run, but you've all managed to create very different successful events. And I think, like I said earlier in the podcast, it should be, if you're somebody who's thinking about being a TO, if you can listen to you 3 in the way that you have built your events, and you can kind of work out what you want to be from your event, but kind of have the same ethics, I think you're probably going to be quite successful, because all 3 of you have been successful from very different ways. Dan, do you have anything else you'd like to add to that, bud?
No, so it just reminded me of an example. So it might have been the first or second RTT of 10th during the Aldari Reign of Terror, and I made the decision to actually, I didn't say this, I didn't announce this at the time, but the vouchers for first place actually were split and given to anyone that faced an Aldari player round 1. So they would never lose their games, but then thank you for playing the game, well done, there's a voucher. That kind of took the sting out of their tail. And then when an Aldari player eventually sort of did win the event, they got a trophy, but I didn't give them any vouchers because that had gone to the Aldari players and had done that. But again, I advertise prizes, and obviously you say there are points and things. But yeah, in terms, that hopefully mitigated someone's experience for having to play Aldari at that time. And I would do other similar things as well, just about encouraging people to get involved and play, rather than just, purely who's better at toys.
That's a great idea. I think in the future I'm going to give anyone a prize that has to play pool at one of my events.
Thanks for that.
No, that was. You know what? Also, as well, it's quite a brave decision to make because, I mean, we was it start of 10th? I mean, myself, Lewis, and Paul, we threw an event together. Was it start of 10th? And it was Eldari were.
Yeah.
Last
September, wasn't it?
Yeah, they were absolutely busted when they came out.
Yeah, Clement and his triple Wraith night, wasn't it?
Yeah, Clement Tillard, you sexy man, you came out and you won the whole thing, and we were using the lovely trophies at the time as well, and that's actually quite an interesting way because Clement knew he said throughout the whole tournament as well that he knew that the Eldari were just busted, and that it was a horrible list to play, and he obviously he came to win the event. It was quite a big event. There was over 60 players. You know, it went very well. But you know, he definitely came to win, and he knew that list would win because Eldari were, like Dan very rightly said, were just astronomically good in comparison to where everything is now. Now, as TOs, this is something that I know that we're all as TOs aware of, is where the meta shifts and how it goes. So, do you think that like obviously Dan, you made a really big decision there. Is that something that you think will happen again in the future? Because we've had issues recently with certain armies coming out and just being miles better than everybody else.
I hope not to such an egregious extent. As I say, I mean, I wasn't brave enough to introduce comp rules or anything like that to the rules. That was kind of my way of acknowledging that I think there is an issue with it, and thankfully it was rectified. But yeah, hopefully we don't. I don't think there's anything currently egregious. Obviously, I'm quite scared at the moment. I've just published what will be my missions for the August GT. But I've only been able to play a couple of games of Prior Nexus myself, and I'm still waiting. I haven't published it properly. It's on social media, and I've shared it in our and the Team Hive Mind Discord. Just look, have I missed anything here? Is there a broken combination that somehow is going to unlock these 5 missions or 6 missions and be an auto win? But Games Workshop have proven much better at responding to things than they have done previously. You know, I can remember a time, you know, back in the early 2000s, you know, the chapter approved and things in White Dwarf. So I'm used to regular support from Games Workshop, and at that time where they didn't support the games, I wasn't really playing 40k, or at least not at events. You know, I was playing with uni friends and things like that at home. So I'm relieved that Games Workshop are, and I think in many ways I'm quite lucky as a TO. I didn't have to navigate that wilderness space that was on there for such a while where Games Workshop weren't supporting games. But no, fingers crossed we don't find ourselves in those situations again.
Yeah, I think we bashed 10th edition quite a bit, but since probably the first couple of months of launch, it's actually been a really good edition in terms of new rules coming out and not destroying the game. I think we saw multiple times in 9th edition that Eldari came out and Admech came out, and it just ruined everything for months on end each time. They don't appear to have done that this time. I took a slightly different approach, Danny. I really like the price deal. I should have done that. That's a really good. I'm going to use that in the future if it ever comes up again. But I was able, in my first event of 10th edition, when Eldar was still so good, I was able just to get an email out to all the players and just say, look, we all know Eldar are amazing. And frankly, if you turn up with Eldar, you're probably going to win. Crack on. Good play to you. But what I would like to see from everybody is, even those of you who are playing Eldar, just to think about the experience you're going to have and the experience your opponents are going to have if you bring a triple Wraith Knight list or you bring something horrific. And to their credit, Eldar did still win the event because even toned down, they were better than everything else by a long mile. But no one brought any Wraith Knights. I think we saw 1 D cannon over the whole weekend. So they were Eldar lists and they were good, but they were not the lists everybody else was playing. And credit to the players because they didn't have to. Someone could have just rocked up with a couple of Wraith Knights and just smashed everyone, and fine. But actually, just saying to people, think about the experience you're both going to have. Is it an experience you want to walk away from this event having had? Are you going to feel better after this weekend, having just crushed everyone and played 5 15-minute games over the weekend? And thankfully, most people thought, actually, you know what, that probably will be a bit boring. I'm going to bring Eldar, but I'm toning them down, and okay, I still win, but actually I do it by challenging people to a decent game.
Yeah, so I agree with all that. I haven't tended to actually intervene, I guess, with tough factions because Games Workshop do a better job of interceding and changing rules, and the data slate changes. And I feel like if all the TOs influence their events and stop people from bringing certain things, then the percentages wouldn't be true, and they wouldn't get the truth around how broken our factions. So I have this belief that we've just kind of got to let it flush through and let them react and do their job. But I totally get where you're coming from, Lewis, in terms of, like, again, you know your customers, you know your community, yeah, you know what that will do to the experience. But if I talk overall, like everybody, I think we do have to let Games Workshop understand what the problem is. If not, they can't fix it.
Exactly, and I didn't make the decision to ban anything or say you can't bring race nights or anything like that. I just put that message out and said, just think before you put your list in, and people did, and they came out something different. And the idea that any one of us as TOs, or even a group of TOs, knows enough about the game that we would be able to ban something or change points or do anything and have an effect that doesn't just completely mess the game up, I think is probably verging on arrogance. I think the idea that I know enough about the game that I can make these changes and suddenly I would solve the problems, I think is just
no. And there is always a big bad out there. I mean, I go to pretty much every UK TC event, and there's always something that is super tough at every event. And I think that's just the cycle we go through. But like you touched, we won't have any more of the 6 months Drakari during 9th Fixed City, or like almost a whole season of AdMech being broken. They do react much quicker, and at most you're talking 2 or 3 months of pain, aren't you, before it gets fixed. So it's short term now, and normally only affects maybe one of our events, doesn't it?
I think it's also worth highlighting, actually, we're talking about this reactivity from Games Workshop. They brought out the new rule set much earlier than anybody thought they would. The data slate came out earlier, the field manual came out earlier, Pariah Nexus came out earlier, and I think that was because they already were aware of what was coming from the codexes that were coming out, and they reacted actually quite well, because Sister's book just was released. I don't know how much any of you have looked into it, but the Sister's book was released and their rules were fantastic. And then literally within a week, the points update, data slate came out, it all changed, and we go straight into a super major of 166 players, and the thing that everyone thought was going to be the most broken thing out there didn't win the event.
They are still very strong, though.
They are very strong,
and the only loss was to Josh, so who's a very experienced, comprehensive player. So
this is true, but we do need more time, admittedly.
I think what's important, I think it was the Dark Angels Codex? That was the first time Games Workshop put in print, on a Warcom article or whatever it was, to say they're not legal for match to play until their rules appear in the MFM, because there was that weirdness period where you could buy the £100 army box, we can get your codex months and months early before it was there, and different events were ruling it differently. So that's actually a relatively new thing, but as you say, it all happens to coincide with that. Personally, I disagree that I think they did it from a player experience perspective. Looking at it, I just think they did it all so it was almost out of the way and not to clash with any of the AOS hype that's going to be going on over the next 6 weeks. I think it was more commercially driven than any kind of player experience, but that's just me with my tinfoil hat on.
But that's what we're here for. We're here for this sort of discussion, and I'm pleased that you've given a different view. Lewis, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo my points from earlier, really, but I think we are in a position now where there's so much more on it than there ever have been, and I do remember the days I used to go to tournaments when your book lasted 4 years and had no changes in that 4 years. So if the army you were playing was good when the book came out, you were rosy for 4 seasons, and if your army was rubbish when it came out, then you just sucked for 4 years, and that's a long time to be playing a game with an army that's rubbish. And then I think we had different members of the community trying to change things and edit things, but GW weren't doing it. So I think we need to call them out when they make mistakes, but also give them credit when they get on top of things, which they appear to be doing at the moment. So I'm not worried. Any events coming up, Sisters may well be strong, and that could well be the case, but they're not strong enough that they're destroying everything when no one else has got a chance. So I think we're in a position where they can be countered, they can be beaten, and therefore they will sit amongst the meta where they sit. And if they're slightly high, they're slightly high, but that doesn't guarantee you go and then win a GT.
No, every faction has got a boogeyman, haven't they, at the moment, and that's what makes it very good. So it doesn't matter what you take. Excuse me. There's something around the corner that is a hard counter. So, oh, sorry. So you can't just turn up at an event with a faction because it's good and just win. And that's what's better about this edition as we are now. And before, like 9th, you could just turn up with Admech or Drakari and you knew you'd win. That doesn't happen anymore, and that's great.
And the average standard of players has gone up as well. I don't know if you guys are noticing that as well, but the quality of players, even newer players, are so much better at the game than I know I ever was when I was first getting started. And I don't know whether that's because they've made the game a little bit more simple and pick the rules up, and therefore you can master them a little bit quicker and get better at the game faster, or just that there's so much more kind of competitive content out there. People can drink it in and learn it a lot quicker, and things like TTS and stuff allow people to practice. So because that standard's got a lot higher, it's much more difficult even for really good players to walk into an event and just crush it, because even a player that they might think shouldn't cause them a problem could come in and cause them a problem. So yeah, I think that's definitely contributed as well.
Yeah, I think everyone's a lot more hungrier for competitive gaming as well. And I see players now at UKT all the time that I remember, like I've either coached them or seen them when they've just started out, losing almost every game at an event, and now they're turning up with a team shirt on and going 4-1 at UKTC Super Majors, and every game is a tough game. I mean, I got to a point where I was going to events and easy games, but now every game feels hard, and you really, if you want to go. I mean, I've never gone 5-0. That's I need to go 5-0 at an event at some point. But I go 4-1 on average, and those 4 wins are hard fought. There's no pushovers anymore. Like, you don't get an easy game anymore. Unless it's Arron, obviously, then that's an easy one. But we won't go there, Arron.
That's it. He's now banned. Anyway, on that bombshell. Thanks. Look, guys, obviously I appreciate I've kept you for quite a while. I want to give each one of you now an opportunity to just tell us about your next event, when it is, when the tickets are on sale, that if they're not already sold out, when the next one is, and just kind of sell yourself. So, Paul, let's start with yourself. Sell us Peterborough Slam for our audience, please, buddy.
So Peterborough Slam. So our next event, we've got an RTT on the 21st of July. Based in Peterborough, obviously, hence the name. Still plenty of tickets. Kind of hit an experience that we haven't had before, haven't we, Arron, where tickets normally are sold out by now. But it's just a bit of a weird kind of lull for Peterborough Slam at the moment. But I'm
funny enough, your other events are selling more, though. It's just
there they are. It's strange. I don't know what it is about July, because we've got another event, a GT 3rd and 4th of August, which is selling well. That was kind of marked as going to be our kind of new unveiling of missions and terrain, wasn't it? Going to be 3rd and 4th of August, but we're back to the drawing board for that. But that will be exciting. So we're redoing all the missions and maps this week for those 2 events. So come along to Peterborough Slam. I don't know if I really need to say much to the local community, and most of you have been to Peterborough Slam that live in the local area. Come. It's a great event. We cater for all. It's just a fun experience.
And Lewis, if you'd like to go next, sell us Saffron Slam, bud.
Will do. What date is this video going out, Arron? Because that will determine when my next event is.
So this will be edited and ready to go out on this Wednesday. So today is the 1st, so it'll be going out on the 3rd.
Excellent. In which case, you may well find, if you are a new player, that we still have a ticket left to Bootcamp Plus, which is a kind of learn to play, a a kind of strategy day where you will get some time with myself, Tom Lohman, who is trying to make his way into Team England, and Chris from 6++, who runs the 6++ show. We are having a day on Saturday, this Saturday, which will be the 7th of July, where we are, or 6th of July, sorry. We've got kind of 3 big training modules over the course of the day. You'll get some one-to-one coaching. You will just be able to spend some time really picking up some key strategies on the game. So we'll be looking into how to get the most out of deployment, how to make the most of the charge phase, and how to really think about how you plan your turnout in terms of how you're going to score your cards and how you're going to plan that. So it should be a really, really good day. We're targeting mostly kind of newer players, but actually if you're a player that's currently going sort of 1 and 4 or 2 and 3 in an event and you just want to push on and take that next level, as I say, we've got one or 2 tickets left of that now for the weekend. So there's only going to be sort of 10, 12 people, so it should be quite kind of really niche environment. And then after that, next couple of events are completely sold out. So nothing has got tickets available now until October, where we have a couple of tickets left to our teams tournament, 40k teams tournament. So that's 19th and 20th of October. So if you want to come along to that, there is still some tickets left for that. Grab them now. I've got 4 or 5 tickets that are kind of half sold but not quite sold yet from people that are planning, so that will almost fill the event. So if you've got a 5-man team and you want to come along and play some teams 40k on some really great terrain sets where we make the board choice as part of your kind of team composition really, really important. That's happening in October, and then we've got a doubles event in December. So there is still probably sort of 20 odd tickets left at a doubles event in December. So that's us for the rest of the year.
And Dan.
Well, so at time of talking to you guys, the August Golden Ticket Qualifier is sold out, but there is a waiting list. Inevitably, life will get in the way of people playing, and there may be some drops. So that is around about 50 players. It's a 5-round GT, and then there's a 6th round with the top 2 players to determine who gets the golden ticket. The next event with tickets on sale for that will be, it's the week before the LGT. I want to say the 21st of September. So that's kind of our road to LGT event. So we'll mirror the day 1 missions, whatever LGT decide, UKTC decide to put in play. But again, with Games Workshop style terrain, because that's all of my events run Games Workshop style terrain. So that's the next big event there with tickets. And then sort of keep an eye out. You check out the website. We've got all kinds of things for other game systems going on. But absolutely 40k is our bread and butter. And if there's demand, I'm happy to put on more RTTs.
Well, thank you very much, guys, for joining us tonight. It's been really interesting talking to all of you, seeing your views, although you seem to echo very similar views and everything, which is actually really refreshing, because if you would really clash, that'd be awkward, right? But anyway, look, thank you for coming on. I've really enjoyed being able to talk to you guys. Obviously, we're going to be posting this out very soon, and it will be great to see what everyone's response is. I think it's just really refreshing to hear from 3 up-and-coming TOs who are smashing it in their local area and doing really well. So just big thanks from us at Black Crow Gaming.
Thanks for having us, Arron.
Thank you, Arron.
No worries. And if you've enjoyed watching, and if you enjoyed this interview, please like, sub and subscribe. That helps us. It helps us promote and continue to do what we're doing for you lovely people. But from us at Black Crow Gaming, I've been Arron, and I just want to say a massive thank you for watching us again. Good evening. Bye all.
Right to 6++.
See you later.
How dare you, Lewis. Bye.